My sister's handwriting has always been neater than mine. I used to be jealous of that when we were kids. She'd write in these perfect looping letters and I'd scribble everything like I was in a hurry to be somewhere else. So when I found the note she left on the kitchen counter of our rental house the morning of my cousin's wedding, I recognized it immediately. That perfect handwriting. That careful, deliberate script. We had to leave early. Something came up. Colton's with you. He knows you. He'll be fine. Don't make a big deal out of this. I read it 3 times. My nephew was 4 years old and asleep on the pull-out couch 6 feet away from me, still in his pajamas with the little dinosaurs on them. The wedding started in 4 hours. My sister and her husband were gone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in that rental kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, holding a piece of notepad paper and listening to my 4-year-old nephew breathe in and out. And I felt something go very cold and very quiet inside me. Then I picked up my phone and called my sister's ex-husband. I should back up. Our family had rented 3 houses on the same street for the week of my cousin Harriet's wedding. Harriet is my mother's sister's daughter. We grew up practically like sisters, and her wedding to her partner Jules was the event of the year for our whole extended family. 32 people flying in from 6 states. It had taken 18 months to plan. My sister Renata and her husband Philip had Colton, who was 4. Renata and I are 11 years apart. She's 37, I'm 26, and we've never been what you'd call close, but we were cordial. We had a system. Family events, holidays, we showed up and we smiled. What I didn't know until much later was that Renata and Philip's marriage had been quietly dissolving for 8 months. And the man she'd been texting since April, a guy she'd met at a work conference in Denver, was named Scott. And Scott lived 40 minutes outside of Asheville. I didn't know any of that on the morning I found the note. What I did know was that my nephew was 4. He didn't know where his mother was. And I had a bridesmaid dress hanging in the closet that I was supposed to be wearing in 4 hours while standing next to Harriet while she got married. Colton woke up around 7:30. He came padding into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas and looked around the room and then looked at me. "Where's Mommy?" I crouched down to his level. He had Renata's eyes, dark brown, serious. He was holding a stuffed elephant he'd had since he was a baby. "Mommy had to go do something," I said. "But you're going to hang out with me today, okay? We're going to the wedding." "Is the wedding the one with the flowers?" "There are going to be a lot of flowers." "Yeah, okay." He seemed to accept this. He sat down at the kitchen table and started arranging his elephant's ears very carefully. Then he looked up. "Is Daddy coming?" And that question, that small, matter-of-fact question from a 4-year-old who didn't know anything was wrong, cracked something open in me. Because Colton's dad, my sister's ex-husband Marcus, had been calling her for 2 weeks. I knew this because my mother had mentioned it, exasperated, saying Renata needed to stop ignoring the co-parenting calls. I knew Marcus had been trying to reach someone about Colton's schedule. I knew he didn't know Colton was in North Carolina. I left Colton eating cereal at the kitchen table and went into the back bedroom and called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. I'd met Marcus exactly 4 times. The wedding where he and Renata got engaged, the baby shower, Colton's 2nd birthday party, and one Thanksgiving that I'd rather forget. He was quiet, methodical, the kind of person who spoke slowly because he was actually thinking before he talked, which was unusual enough in my family that I'd always noticed it. "It's Audrey," I said. "Renata's sister." A pause. "Okay, I'm in Asheville with Colton. Renata left this morning. I don't know where she went. She left me a note, and Colton is here with me and I don't know what to do." Another pause. Longer this time. "She took him to North Carolina without telling me. I didn't know that was, I thought you knew. I'm sorry." "I didn't know." "What does the note say?" I read it to him. The whole thing. "Don't make a big deal out of this." When I finished reading, there was silence on the line and I couldn't tell if he was angry or just very, very still. "Audrey," he said finally, "I need you to listen to me. I've been trying to reach Renata for 2 weeks because we have a custody agreement and she was supposed to have Colton home to me by last Friday. She missed the handoff. She's been ignoring my calls. I have a lawyer." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Okay," I said. "Is Colton safe?" "Yes. He's in the kitchen eating cereal. He's fine." "Okay. I heard him exhale. I'm going to make some calls. Don't let him out of your sight. And Audrey. Don't call Renata yet. Can you do that? I looked at the note on the counter. That perfect handwriting. Yeah, I said. I can do that. The wedding was at 2 o'clock. By 9 in the morning, I had a 4-year-old, a bridesmaid dress, and a phone that was very carefully not calling my sister. I called Harriet instead. Harriet answered laughing, already in the middle of getting ready, someone in the background saying something about bobby pins. I told her what had happened in as few words as possible. The laughter stopped. Are you serious? I'm completely serious. Where is Renata? I don't know. Does Mom know? Not yet. A long pause. Hairdryer somewhere in the background. Then Harriet said very carefully, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to bring Colton. He can sit with Aunt Beverly during the ceremony. She's great with kids. And you are going to stand up there with me like we planned, because I am not doing this without you. Everything else is secondary. Deal? I felt something loosen in my chest. Harriet has always been like that. Straight to the point, no drama. Just what do we do next? Deal, I said. My mother found out at 10:30. I texted her to come to my rental house alone, which should have been enough of a warning, but she still came in already talking, already moving, already in hostess mode, straightening things, commenting on the coffee maker, asking if Colton had eaten, and I had to actually put my hand on her arm to make her stop. Mom! Renata left. She looked at me. What do you mean she left? She left this morning. She left me a note. She's gone somewhere and I don't know where. And I've talked to Marcus and there's a custody issue I didn't know about. My mother sat down. She's 61. She's the kind of woman who holds everything together through sheer will, who has never missed a single school event or family birthday in 30 years, who sends cards for things people don't even send cards for anymore. She sat down in that rental kitchen chair and she looked at Colton, who was now in the living room watching cartoons, and she said, "How long has this been going on? I don't know. She didn't tell me anything." I know. She should have told me. Her voice was very quiet. That's her son. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Marcus called back at 11:15. He'd spoken to his attorney because Renata had taken Colton across state lines past the agreed custody handoff date without notifying him. She was in violation of their custody agreement. His attorney was going to file for an emergency modification hearing. In the meantime, he wanted to know, could I keep Colton safe until he could get there? I'm in Charlotte right now, Marcus said. I can be in Asheville in 2.5 hours. The wedding is at 2. I know. I'm sorry. A beat. Go to the wedding. I'll get there as fast as I can. He's safe with you. I stood in the back bedroom with the door closed, listening to my nephew laugh at something on TV in the next room, and I said, Marcus, what has she been doing with the custody stuff? A long pause. Audrey, she's missed 3 handoffs in 8 months. Not by accident. Each one she has a reason. Colton's sick, there's a family thing, she got the dates wrong. But it's always something, and every time I've had to chase her down, I've documented everything. He paused. I should have moved faster. I kept thinking I thought she'd stop. She left him with me, I said. She didn't even leave me her location. I know. He asked for you this morning. That was the first thing he asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Take care of him until I get there, please. I will, I said. I promise. I got Colton dressed in the button-down shirt and khakis that Renata had packed in his bag, at least she'd packed for the wedding. And I did my own hair with one hand and kept my phone close. My mother had gone back to the main house to manage things there. I'd been deliberately, carefully not reaching out to Renata. At 12:45, she texted me. Hey, just checking in, is Colton doing okay? We'll be back tonight. I stared at that message for a long time. We'll be back tonight. Not, I'm sorry. Not, here's my number in case there's an emergency. Not even an acknowledgement that what she'd done was unusual in any way. I put the phone face down on the counter and finished putting on my earrings. I didn't text back. The wedding was beautiful. I say that and I mean it genuinely. Harriet had spent 18 months planning it and it showed. white and sage green everywhere. Wild flowers that looked like they'd just been picked from a field, string lights in the trees outside. Jules cried when Harriet walked down the aisle. Harriet laughed because she couldn't help it. I stood up there in my sage green dress and I watched my cousin get married and I smiled until my face ached. And I did not think about my sister, and I kept one eye on Colton, who was in the third row with my Aunt Beverly, drawing in a small notebook and not causing a single problem. He really is such a good kid. Marcus arrived at 4:17. I saw him walk into the reception venue, a converted barn about 20 minutes outside the city, and I excused myself from the table and went to meet him. He looked like he'd driven very fast. He was still in work clothes, no tie, hair a little disheveled. Colton saw him from across the room. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. 4-year-olds don't really perform emotion. They don't know how yet. So what I saw was just completely real. Colton's whole face changing, and then him running, full speed, across the barn, shouting "Daddy" in a voice that made several people at nearby tables turn around. Marcus caught him and picked him up and held on to him and didn't say anything for a moment. I walked over. Marcus looked at me over Colton's shoulder and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. My throat was doing something I didn't want to deal with at a wedding reception, so I focused on a spot just above his head and breathed. We found a quiet corner. Marcus had already spoken to his attorney twice more on the drive up. The emergency filing had been submitted that afternoon, citing the missed handoffs, the out-of-state removal without consent, and this was new information. Text message records that Marcus's attorney had obtained showing that Renata had discussed the plan to delay the handoff with her mother 3 weeks earlier. My mother. I looked at Marcus. My mom knew. There are texts between them, he said carefully. From 3 weeks ago. Your mother didn't initiate it, but she didn't tell me either. I sat with that for a while. My mother, who had sat in that kitchen chair that morning looking devastated. My mother, who had said she should have told me, but had known at least part of it 3 weeks ago and had stayed quiet. I thought about calling her right then. I thought about walking across that barn and finding her at the family table and asking her directly. But I looked at Colton, who was sitting in Marcus's lap eating wedding cake, completely content, and I thought, not today. Not at Harriet's wedding. There was time for the rest of it later. Renata came back to the rental house at 9:45 that night. Marcus and I had taken Colton back after the reception. He'd fallen asleep in the car, and we'd transferred him to the pull-out couch without waking him. And then we'd sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and waiting. Marcus had been very quiet. Not angry, exactly. Just final. The way someone looks when they've made a decision they've been postponing, and they're not postponing it anymore. We heard the car. We heard the front door. Renata came in still wearing her going-out clothes. Nice restaurant somewhere, clearly, and she was already talking before she fully registered what she was looking at. Hey, he's asleep. Good. Okay, I was going to text but service was. She stopped. She looked at Marcus. Then, she looked at me. What is he doing here? Not a question, a statement. Her voice had gone flat. He came to get Colton, I said. You called him. She turned to me fully now, and I recognized the expression. I'd seen it my whole life. That very particular look my sister got when something wasn't going her way and she needed someone to blame for it. You called him and you had no right to do that. Colton is my son and you had no right, Renata. Marcus's voice was calm. Completely calm, and something about the calm was worse than if he'd shouted. You violated the custody order. I've already filed. You can call your attorney in the morning. She stared at him. He asked for you, I said. I don't know why I said it. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't planned. It just came out. First thing this morning when he woke up. Before he asked for breakfast, before he asked about the wedding. He asked where his dad was. Something moved across her face. I couldn't name it exactly. Not guilt, not quite. More like a door closing. You don't understand, she said, quieter. You left me a note, I said. On note paper. You didn't leave me your location. You didn't leave me an emergency contact number. You didn't tell me how long you'd be gone. He's for Renata. I knew he'd be fine with you. That's not the point. She was quiet. He was fine, I said. He had a good day. He watched his cousin get married, and he ate cake, and he drew pictures at the reception. And then his dad showed up, and he ran across the room, and you should have seen his face. My voice stayed even. I've been working on that all day. You should have seen it. Renata went to stay with our aunt that night. I don't know what conversations happened on that side. I kept my phone down and let it be. Marcus took Colton home to Charlotte the next morning, early. I was up to see them off. Colton gave me a hug that involved his full body weight and his stuffed elephant pressed against the side of my face, which I'm choosing to remember as his way of saying thank you. Come visit, Marcus said at the car. Yeah, I said. I will. I meant it. The fallout happened over the following 2 weeks in pieces, the way family fallout usually does, not all at once but in calls and texts and silences that said more than words. My mother and I had a conversation that was long and difficult and ended without resolution, which is sometimes how it goes. She had her reasons. She thought she was protecting Renata. She hadn't understood, she said, how serious the custody violation was. I told her it didn't matter whether she'd understood. She'd known something was wrong and she'd stayed quiet, and a 4-year-old had woken up in an unfamiliar house asking where his parents were. She didn't have an answer for that. Harriet called me from her honeymoon to check on me. That's Harriet. Somewhere on a beach in Portugal, taking 10 minutes to make sure I was okay. I told her I was fine, and this time I actually meant it. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Asheville. I wasn't asked to testify, but Marcus's attorney had my account of the morning, the note, Colton's question about his dad, the text Renata had sent in the afternoon like everything was normal. Renata's attorney argued that it was a miscommunication about the dates. The judge didn't seem to find that convincing. Primary physical custody was modified. Marcus got it. Renata got regular visitation with specific, documented handoff procedures and a provision that any travel outside their home state required advance written notice. Marcus texted me when the decision came through. Just, we got it. Thank you. I was sitting in my apartment in Columbus when I got that message. I was eating leftover Thai food and watching something on TV I wasn't really paying attention to. I read the text and I put the phone down and I sat very still for a minute. Then I texted back, Colton is lucky to have you. I meant that too. My sister and I haven't spoken much since Asheville. I'm not angry at her in any dramatic way. I don't have the energy for that kind of anger, and it doesn't help anyone. But I'm not pretending either. I'm done pretending that things are fine when they're not fine. Done smiling through family dinners while something real goes unacknowledged in the room. She made a choice. She left her son asleep in a rental house and drove 40 minutes to have brunch with someone she'd been lying to her family about, and she left a note with neat, careful handwriting that said, "Don't make a big deal out of this." I did make a big deal out of it. I'll keep making a big deal out of it. I'll keep making a big deal out of it. Because Colton is 4 years old and he asked for his dad before he asked for breakfast, and someone in that situation needed to make a big deal out of it, I'm glad it was me. A few months after Asheville, I drove down to Charlotte on a Saturday. Marcus had told me Colton had started soccer, 4-year-old soccer, which apparently involves very little actual soccer and a lot of kids looking at clouds and picking up dirt, but still. I sat in a folding lawn chair on the sideline and watched my nephew run in the approximate direction of a ball while wearing shin guards approximately the size of his entire leg, and I thought, he's okay. He's actually going to be okay. After practice, he came running over and grabbed my hand to show me a worm he'd found near the field entrance. He was very serious about the worm. He had thoughts about where the worm was going and what it was doing and whether it had a family. I crouched down next to him and looked at the worm and said yes, I was sure it had a family, and yes, I was sure the family was nearby, and yes, we should probably let it get back to them. He nodded very gravely and set the worm down in the grass, and we watched it disappear, and he took my hand again and said, "Okay, can we get ice cream now?" "Yeah," I said. "We can get ice cream." And we did. I've thought a lot about what I actually did that morning. Not whether it was right. I stopped questioning that pretty quickly. But why it felt so hard to do in the first place. I grew up in a family where keeping the peace was treated like a virtue. Don't make waves. Don't embarrass anyone. Work it out privately. And for a long time, I thought that was just how mature people handled things. You swallow the difficult thing, you smile at the dinner table, and you tell yourself you're being the bigger person. What I understand now is that there's a difference between being the bigger person and being the person who absorbs everything, so no one else has to feel uncomfortable. Those aren't the same thing. One takes genuine strength. The other just looks like it does. When Colton woke up that morning and asked where his mom was, something shifted in me. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a lightning bolt or some sudden clarity. It was quieter than that. It was just the simple, undeniable fact of a 4-year-old in dinosaur pajamas who had no idea what was happening around him and deserved someone who was going to act like it mattered. And I was the only person in that house. So I acted like it mattered. I called Marcus because it was the right thing to do, and I knew it was the right thing to do, and for once in my life, I didn't spend 45 minutes talking myself out of the right thing because it might cause friction. That's not a heroic thing. That's just a basic thing. But it took me 26 years to be able to do it without flinching. Here's what I've come to believe. The choices we make when it's inconvenient are the ones that actually define us, not the easy calls. Anyone can do the right thing when it costs them nothing. The real question is what you do when the right thing means your sister might not speak to you, when your mother might be upset, when the whole family gathering might become complicated because of something you set in motion. That's where character actually gets decided. Renata made her choices too. She chose to leave. She chose to write that note the way she wrote it. Casual, almost breezy, like what she was doing was no different than asking me to grab her something from the coffee shop. I don't think she's a monster. I think she was someone who had been allowed, for a long time, to treat the people around her as soft places to land without consequence. And consequences have a way of arriving eventually, whether you've prepared for them or not. Marcus is a good father. Colton is thriving. That's the part I hold on to when the family stuff gets heavy. And Colton found a worm and introduced me to it like it was the most important thing that had happened all week. Which, honestly, maybe it was. Maybe that's the whole point. You do the hard thing when it's in front of you, and then eventually, if you did it right, you end up crouched in the grass next to someone small and earnest who just wants to make sure a worm gets home safely. That's enough. That's actually enough.